Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou I tēnei wā e tēnō māhaki ana ke te haere mai ki waingino o tō tātou whare. Te mihi tūtahi ki ngā atua, ko e te timatanga, ko e te whakamutu o ngā mea katoa, e honore krore ki te atua, he maunga rongo ki te whenua whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. I tēnei wā, e whakamaumahara ngā tini roi mata, ngā whētūrangi te iro, I ngā mate I tēnei wā. Haere, haere, haere atu rā. Haere ki Hawaii nui, Hawaii ro, Hawaii pao mau mau, e te hono ngā wairua, no reira haere ki te pō. Kei te mihi ki te karakea, kei te mihi ki a koe, e tēnō atāhua, te tīmatanga o tēnei hui. Kei te mihi ki te rangatira ki a koe, Albi, e te tuakana, ki tō mihi whakatau, e atāhua tō kupu, e tēnō, e mihi aroha ki a koe, ki tō mihi whakatau I tēnei tā, ki te timatanga o tēnei hui. Kia koutou mai, e mātakitaki mai, e noho kei wainganui e te puna, puna mātauranga ki te noho ki runga I o tātou whare I runga te rorohiko ki te mātakitaki mai. E aroha mai, tēnō pauri te ngākau e kaore haere mai ki, haere ki pōneki I tēnei ata, kei te pakuru te waka rererangi, engari, kei te mihi ki a koutou I tēnei wā, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Just to acknowledge everyone here watching in our National Library and online, just to acknowledge you and to acknowledge our kai karakia for the beautiful karakia and to our rangatira Albi for to welcome us here and to welcome myself and everyone into this whare. This kōrero is on ngā kitinga o te maramataka, and hopefully as I share my screen. This kōrero is ngā kitinga o te maramataka. It's just an insight. Maramataka insights. We're not going to be able to cover a lot, but hopefully we can do a nice broad scope. And around maramataka, I grew up with my karo and my kuia in a little place called Te Hauke. Grew up gardening, and grew up with big gardens, and that's how it was back in those days. And we think back to our grandparents and maybe our parents as well, where they would grow everything themselves, and it's art that's sort of disappearing, especially for those that live in the bigger cities, growing their own gardens. And it's something that I'm passionate about. I've worked in tangihanga for many years, but maramataka is something that has been revitalised and re-energised in our community today. So hopefully we just give an overview into our kōrero. I'm going to start with this whakatauki, which is a Māori proverb. And it goes, tui ki te rangi, tui ki te whenua, tui ki te moana, ka rongo, e rongo te pō, e rongo te ao. And what this whakatauki sort of encapsulates everything about the maramataka. What is ultimately what they're saying is whatever's in the heavens is in the lands, or whatever's in the heaven is bound to the land and the sea, and standing balance between the divisions of night and day. And ultimately what they're saying is whatever's happened, tuike te rangi is anything in the heavens. When we talk about the tamanui te rā, the sun, hina marama, the moon, ngā whetū, the stars, the clouds, the winds, and that's everything to do with tuike te rangi. Tuike te whenua is anything to do with the land, our rākau, our puti, our kaimara, our manu, all our different birds and insects, is the next part of tuia ki te whenua. And tuia meaning to stitch or to bind. So the heavens are bound to the land, and tuia ki te moana is anything to do with our ika, our fish, our kaimoana, all the different varieties of kai and animals in the oceans, our dolphins, our whales. And ultimately, we call this whakatapu torutanga, or to triangulate. And it's triangulating the season. So if we're going to go into a little bit more kōrero as we get further into this presentation. E rongo te pō, rongo te ao, pō representing the night, or te pō representing hina marama, the moon. E rongo te ao representing Tamanui Te Rā, the sun. And it's balancing the ancestral knowledge and with our modern day context today. And so this is the whole whakatauki that encapsulates maramataka. Often when we talk about maramataka, we're talking about calendars, lunar calendars. We talk about, Gregorian calendar. Maramataka encapsulates all of that. It's bigger than just a lunar calendar. We call it an environmental calendar. The movement of the taiao at every phases of every day and every season. So first I'm going to talk about the Rātaka. And the Rātaka is the Gregorian calendar which we follow today. Just a little brief history of this kōrero. And this Gregorian calendar goes all the way back to a pope by the name of Pope Gregory the 13th. And the year 1582, Pope Gregory designed this solar calendar that followed the movements of the sun. Prior to that, they followed a Julian calendar, which connects with Julius Caesar, and that was a 10-month calendar. Then they moved to this Gregorian calendar, which we use today, which is, if we have a look at our calendar, it is, July, August, September, October. And this calendar was taken from the made up of Roman names. So if we have a look at the month of July, July is a connection to Julius Caesar, and is one of the only human names in our calendar. All the others were named after Greek gods and Roman gods. And if we have a look at the months of September, Sept meaning seventh, the 7th month, October meaning the 8th month, and these talk about different seasons. We go right back to March. We look at March and April and May. March meaning to march, and that was the time that the armies would move. April was a time named after the atu of the god Api, which means to spring forth, and it's beginning to flourish. May is named after Mai, and so we have all these names in our Gregorian calendar, which describes the environment up in the northern hemisphere. And if we have a look in around December or March, December and January, and that's when we celebrate New Year's, and it was about families coming together. And in the northern hemisphere, that's where we get the name of, that's where they came together and we celebrate New Year's. And it's in the winter month. Winter was such an important time because it was easiest to distinguish of all the seasons, and often they went into a time of going home. The battles, the wars never went ahead, and they would be able to stay home because it was warmer and nothing grew. So ultimately, when we look at our calendar, the Gregorian calendar is we have a look at the Earth or Papa Tuanuku, and we measure those. We measure that, and that measurement is where on the 1st of January every year we celebrate this New Year's. And this calendar that was written by Pope Gregory done an amazing job that we can go absolutely anywhere in the world, and everyone is following this calendar. If I was to go to China, if I was to go to Canada, and it keeps the world moving together. But one of the things that tragically got lost with the introduction of the Gregorian calendar into Aotearoa, into any indigenous nation, was this calendar sort of overlaid the indigenous knowledge. And our maramataka, when we look, we were often referred to, is measuring and watching the moon, and it's a lunar calendar. And our tipuna it was easier to identify what we call ngā mata, the many faces of the moon, and they gave a name, an ingoa, a name, and they would have actions associated with that. And most of the time we look at the kupu marama taka, marama meaning the moon, taka meaning to fall or to repeat. So marama taka means the repeating cycles of the moon, but also the repeating cycles of the environment. And marama taka was often used for in the Mairano, in the terms of our ancestors, was at the time of growing gardens, gathering kai, and te hiika. And when we look at the name marama, we have the kupu mara, the first word, and mara meaning garden. We also have another word in there called rama. and Ramatuna meaning, or Ramaika meaning under the lights to catching fish and catching eels. And so when we look at that kupu marama, it was often associated with kai gardening, fishing, eeling, and gathering a kai. And maramataka meaning the gardening and fishing and everything moved in patterns as well. And there were specific times that we would harvest more. And so that's what maramataka is about, moving with the environment on a daily basis. And when we introduced we have our months, we have January, February, March, April, May, June. But in our maramataka, overshot the gun there. When we look at our maramataka, we have on the side there we have hanuere, pepuere, maihi, apireira. Those are the transliterated names of January, February, March, and we use these names when we're using the Gregorian calendar. These Māori, hanuere, pepuere, maihi, apireira, May. We use these when we're using the Gregorian calendar because these names align with the Gregorian calendar. When we use the names of Pipiri, Hongonui, or Here Turi Koko, Mahuru, these names are connected to the maramataka, the lunar calendars. So when we have a look at these months, they don't actually quite fit. So if I was to look at Pipiri, it could rise, that month could start in May and end in June. And that's why it lives in this world of ish. It was around June-ish. Hongonui is around July-ish. It could start in July or run into August. And we're going to learn when those start so that we can use these names correctly. Here, turi, koko, mahuru, whiringa, nuku, whiringa, arangi. And each of these names have actions associated with it. So if we have a look at this time of the year, Pipiri, Hongonui, Here, turi, koka, these are months that describe our Hotokia winter. And when we pipiri, or te piri mai, te here mai, the hononga mai, meaning to come together, keep warm. And it's talking about the environment this is the time of Hotokia, it's going to be cold. And we call this time many names. It could be known as Takarua. And Takarua is a star that is a marker for winter. We also have Matariki, which is another tohu, which we've just celebrated. The rising of Matariki, and that's the furthest north that Tamanui Tara is going to go. We have another one called, in this month of Hongonui or July, we call it Te Rua or Takarua. We're into the second stage of winter. We have another, and so there's another name for winter, which is known as Hikumatu. And so different iwi had different ways of describing the environment at winter. And so, but when we have a look at the actions to piri, to hono, and to here, meaning to come together, keep each other nourished. And when we have a look about the time we celebrate Matariki, it's actually in total relation to when the Northern Hemisphere celebrate their winter. And so we celebrate ours as well. And there was a time that we had done all the work, we put all our kai into the pātaka, and that we were able to live off the resources of all the hard work that had been done that ran from Koanga, which is in spring, all the way to autumn, planting and preparing those gardens, gathering kai and putting into a pātaka so that during winter we could come together. We have a look at our maramataka. I'll try and teach it so that you can sort of leave here and go out this evening and have a look. And when we have a look at Rako Nui is the full moon. Now, I don't know what the weather's like where you are watching this, but last night it was pretty wet up here in Tamaki. Lots of rain, lots of clouds, but in the morning we saw the full moon. And Rako Nui is, we use our hands, Rako Nui is the full moon. So if you go out this evening and as the sun is setting, you'll see the full moon rising. And so Rako Nui is the full moon, it rises at the setting of the sun. And what we can do from there is we can use our hands. And if you see the right side of the moon is nice and smooth like a banana and the left side has the shadow, that means from that the moon, or Hina Marama, is travelling from a full moon and down to a new moon. And when she's about halfway, like or they call it a waning moon, but we at the Moya Hina Marama, she's going to sleep. And when she gets to about a half moon or a quarter moon, and we know that she's in the Tangaroa phase, and Tangaroa is often seen as one of the most productive times of the maramataka, meaning for planting and fishing. But when we have a look at these calendars, it says Tangaroa is a great time to plant. However, we have to take into consideration as well, is that it's planting in the right season as well. So we might, and when we think back to our tipuna, our ancestors, they didn't have the kai that we have here, which is like the broccoli, the spinach, all those greens that can grow in winter. The main source of their kai would have been kumara, riwai, peru, all the different varieties, taro, and they planted that, but they have to plant it in warmer weather. And so we know that would be just after Koanga. There's a month called Whiringa Nuku, and Whiringa Nuku, which is around October-ish, September, October. And as Whiringa Nuku means to whiri, that the papa tūnuku is beginning to warm. And then as she's warming, we plant our seeds, and Whiringa Rangi is when they begin to sprout and the shoots begin to come through. But it all depends on of where your maramataka is. So that we have many maramataka in Aotearoa. We have them from the Tai Tokoro, which is known as the Windsorless North, or can be completely to the Tai Tonga down in Otago, Dunedin. The atmosphere, the way that they planting would be at various times of the year. So Tangaroa. And as we come down to the Whero Moon is often seen as the beginning of the new month. So when there's a Whero Moon, and that could happen on the 4th of, let's say it was on the 4th of July, that's when the month of Honganui starts, and they'll run through to maybe the 3rd of August. And so that's when we're talking about different maramataka starting at different times. And most maramataka start on the Whero Moon. And a Whero Moon is when the sun and the moon rise together. And during the daytime, and they travel through our day sky, through the daytime, and they rise together, they set together. And our tipuna often said, he whero te marama, he rā te no kino. And that on the Whero Moon, there's darkness in the night. And actually, really, if you want to go stargazing, I always say, if you want to see stars, wait for the new moon, and if the weather's fine, you get an absolutely clear view of all of our whetū, because the Hina Marama is not in the night sky, blocking the light. And then when we have a look at Hina Marama, and she's nice and smooth on the left side, that tells us smooth on the left side, shadow on the right side of her, that she's going from Whero all the way back up to Rākau Nui. And when it gets to about a half moon or a quarter moon, that's the tamatea phase. And our tipuna would often say it's an unpredictable time in the weather. But when you start studying the maramataka, those weather patterns start becoming predictable. There's a lot of, it's associated with a lot of strong winds and rain. And so this is just the 4 basic parts of the maramataka, which is Rākau Nui, the full moon. Tangaroa is the waning moon, quarter moon waning, or kei te moia Hina Marama. Whero is the new moon, which is the beginning of the calendar, the maramataka calendar, each month. And the tamatea is the kei te oho Hina Marama, meaning she's beginning to awaken, and that would be known as the quarter moon waxing. Often, when you're looking for maramataka, they often come like this, and they have all these names like Whero, Tiria, Ohoata, Uenoku, Okoro, and they often have a calendar where it says a good day for planting, good day for fishing. good day for planting. And often when I grew up in our little place of Te Hauke, the raining was probably one of our favourite times of the year, because when it rained, our lake flooded and we didn't have to go into the lake, and the water would come right up to the railway tracks and we could walk out and kei te rama ngā tuna, is we'll make these fires and walk on these corrugated boats that we had made and push them through the water or use a torch, and we would gather tuna that would swim up to the edge. And so when most people say, oh, it's a wet weather, for us it was an exciting time of the year. And when we have a look at these maramataka, they vary between, this one here is a 30-day maramataka from Ngāti Kahungunu, but some will have 26 names, some will have 27, 28, 29, 30, all the way up to 35, and some of these names are interchangeable, and it's very dependent on the area that you live in. So in terms of coming back to that whakatauki, tui ki te rangi, tui ki te whenua, tui ki te moana, we're just going to give a bit of a kōrero about that as we begin to wind up. So in terms of tui ki te rangi, you know, we're in the Hōtoke month, and we've just been celebrating Matariki, and this was taken just around the corner from our home, and we have over here Te Wakarangi, which is Matariki. Sitting over here we have Te Kokotea, and then we have this here is Tautoru, and the star pair is Puanga. So in the mornings of winter, at the beginning of winter, Matariki and Puanga are the stars that symbolise this is the furthest north that this Tamanui is going to go, and this is where we get to Takanga o te Raihua, or Hine Takurua, meaning the winter solstice is just near the rising of Matariki, and that was when we have our longest nights, or the shortest day. And over here to the right, there's a star called Takurua, and Takurua is known as Hine Takurua, but Takurua is also symbolising winter. Te Rua Takurua is the second phase of winter. And so Matariki, and we've had lots of kōrero a bit from Dr. Rangi Mātāmua, and absolutely exciting that we had a public holiday and we're able to have this day off. And Matariki is all about being with your whānau. It's all about honouring and remembering those that have passed. And it's also about, if we have pātaka and we have extra resources, that we look after those that may be they may not have the resources that they need. So it's about sharing and watching out for our community, because a lot of our whānau go hungry and they go cold at this time of the year, or they don't have enough kai. This is what this is about, is around sharing our resources. Another star that symbolises, that rises in the morning, is a star called Antares, also known as Re, who is on the Awaka, on a part of a constellation called Scorpius Tail, but we know this as Te Mātua Maui, the Hook of Maui, and is the pūrākau that is shared through all out about Polynesia of Maui. And at night, if we go out in the night sky and we'll see this hook, this is the story of Maui's hook chasing through the coldest nights and through winter, trying to slow the sun down. And when we get to summer, this Te Mātua Maui is there over the top of the sun, which is known as Te Takanga o te Raihua Hine Raumati, the longest day, known as the summer solstice. And so in all of our pūrākau hold mātauranga, and the story of Maui slowing down the sun is talking about the stars and their positioning and the resources. So tuiki, in this time of the year in Hōtoke, tui ki te rangi is Matariki, Puanga, Takurua and Rehua. In terms of tui ki te whenua, what we might start to see in different plants flower at different, and depending on where you are, but where we are, the kawakawa is starting to fruit. The fofo paku they're beginning to berry, and other plants like the manuka are around here are flowering. So it's about, at the rising of Matariki and the rising of Puanga, plants and trees on the land begin to flower. And that's the connection between Tui ki te rangi and Tui ki te whenua. In terms of Tui ki te moana, Tui ki te moana is that we have what we call a piharo, and a piharo is also another name for a piharo is a lamprey, also known as the korokoro, also known as the kanakana down in Te Waipounamu in the South Island. And at the rising of Matariki, the flowering of these plants, these lamprey to the right are making their way up our rivers. And so that's how we get whatever's that connection between Tui ki te rangi, whatever's happening in the heavens with the rising of Matariki and the rising of Puanga, Tui ki te whenua, we have the flowering of the kawakawa, the fofo-paku, the puawānanga, the manuka. And Tui ki te whenua is we have this kai, which is known as the piharo or the korokoro, begin to come up our waterways, and our tipunua gather this. The other cool thing at this time of the year, of the rising of Matariki, the tohora, also known as the right whale, is situated and sitting down at the bottom of Te Waipounamu in a place called the Auckland Islanders, and there they're gathering, they're giving birth, and they come together at the rising of Matariki, and they hang out there for winter, raising their whānau. So this is just to give you an insight, this kōrero, in terms of maramataka, is to really share that it's more than just a lunar calendar. And one of the things that we're using this maramataka for is indigenizing data. There's many ways we can use it to grow kai, we can use it for fishing, we can use it to triangulate our environment, and the stuff that we've been teaching, especially with different organizations, and when they might do a study of the tuna, what star relates to that tuna or an eel, and when they migrate and when they come back. And so it's more than just a calendar, it's getting a complete picture of the taiao and its environment. And I hope that you've enjoyed this poto kōrero, this kōrero. We want to leave a few minutes for some pātai and some questions, but hopefully if you're wanting to begin this journey in maramataka, try and find a maramataka that's near you, which is from your iwi. You might have it in your whānau. And then just begin by studying your environment. If I could put maramataka in its simplest form, maramataka is to know where you're standing in the environment that you're in. And always start from home. Have a look around what streams and rivers or creeks or oceans surround me, what trees surround me. Go outside and have a look try and find the moon and hina marama. Go out and spend time in the evenings looking at stars. And our tipuna would study and they would observe the patterns of the environment and triangulate them together. And nō reira e te whānau kei te mihi ki a koutou. I'll conclude with that and then give a bit of time if there's for any questions and answers.
So Ricky, one person online is asking, can you discuss, so it just disappeared. Can you discuss the use of the maramataka in relation to changing climate?
Oh, that's a great pātai. The climate is constantly, it's one of the things that the debates that are going on in terms of global warming. How do we adapt to that? Maramataka is about repositioning ourselves now. And when we follow maramataka, it's about living. It reminds us that we are what we say, the taina, that we're the youngest of all the creations in this world, and that we should be looking after our environment that we're in. And there's going to be massive changes, but it's what we do with, I always say, start within our own whare, start from home and start expanding out. But maramataka is all about adapting to the environment that you're in. And so our tipuna, when they would navigate from different island to island, the environment changed. When they came down there to Aotearoa, it's a lot more different environment to that which is up into Moana Nui a Kiwi in the Pacific. And so it's about adapting, it's about caring for our environment, watching out for our environment. And that's not just Māori, that's many indigenous nations, many people, many of our people and many whānau are passionate about the environment, and it's about, I think we've gone, in my opinion, we've gone past just sustainability. We have to get into action now in terms of protecting and looking after our environment. If our ocean, we used to be able to get kai that, anywhere, like if I think back to our lake, we don't have the numbers of eels that used to come through because of what they've been doing up on the rivers. So it's a collaborative working with fisheries, working with forestry. Everyone needs to be sitting around on this table and having a call, not just the scientists. Hope that answers your question. Kia ora.
Thank you, Ricky. Also another question: for a person who does not affiliate with an iwi, how can I find the relevant maramataka? And additionally, do you have an idea of how many different maramataka there are in New Zealand?
Oh, there's many maramataka. Ideally, what they would look like, I would say there'd be a different one every 50 kilometres. In Aotearoa, there's hundreds of them. The big one is maybe just even have a Google research, because there's been a lot of research done about gathering different maramataka, or there's some in the whānau that whānau have. First is probably just have a look. Google maramataka in your area. If not, you can get a maramataka off Te Papa. They have one on their website, even though it's a kahununu one. But they're around. If you're looking for them, you'll find them. Google, if you're on YouTube, you can watch YouTubes on maramataka now. There's people doing live feeds. It's absolutely so much more, an abundance of mātauranga being shared now.
Kia ora. There's also a question: Kewhia Te Hauki, where you grew up, where is it?
Oh, okay, yeah, Te Hauki. Te Hauki is it's a little place 20 kilometres south of Hastings, near Te Aute College. Absolutely love. It's a place, if you blink, you'll miss it. No one stops there. It's just got a state highway too, but it's a place I call home, and we used to grow a lot of our kai there.
Sure. Hey, kia ora, Ricky. Kia ora. I thought you were going to say, ko te pito o te ao, te hauki. Ka nui nā pito o te ao. Ko rātu ki anō tērā te pito. Nā reira pamihi atu ki a koe e te rangatira. I sit here as a Māori public servant, tasked with many things to try and support our government agency, our government organisation, to find ways of effectively engaging with Māori. The impact of colonisation on whānau Hapuniwi has been profound. So when we are tasked as Māori public servants to support our organisation to engage with Māori effectively, and the renaissance within Māori communities to return to those traditional ways of learning, like the maramataka. What would your advice be to us as public servants, especially Māori public servants, when we're trying to find an effective engagement model to engage with Māori, particularly in the context of maramataka?
One of the things that, or what I've been working over the years, is about indigenising the data. Because often when we give reports and we give stats, it's often from the Gregorian Canada, a Western view, there's nothing absolutely wrong with it. But there's a whakatauki that goes, mā te tikanga kia ako, mā te pono kia marama, mā te pūrākau kia maumahara. And often when we do the data, is to present the truth and the facts. And what we realise is the truth and the facts often, what that whakatauki said, teach me the facts and I'll learn, tell me the truth and I'll understand, but tell me a story and I'll remember that forever in my heart. And Maramataka and indigenising the data is it's about presenting the truth and it's about presenting the facts, but it's about presenting it in a way that it's a story that Māori will connect to. And when we often give data, and we often look at the data that we present to Māori, often it's never from any indigenous nation on the world, because the impacts of colonisation and the impacts of racism is huge. And so when we present the data, all of our data says that we lead poverty, we lead incarceration in prisons in terms of health, and it's often, it might present the truth and facts, but it's often painting this picture that things are dire. What's missing is the voices of the people. And Maramataka is about finding balance, not only in the Western world, but in the Indigenous world. And that's what E Rongo Te Pōronga Te Ao is how do we present this in a way, and how can we maintain this balance with the Gregorian calendar, this calendar of time that the world is using? How can we use Maramataka, which is an environmental calendar, and it's about working them both together, because you need both the environmental calendar, we need our environment, but we also need our Gregorian calendar to live in this world. And it can be little things that we can do within an organisation. Start small and work big. What that looks like, that's a whole nother wānanga, depending on the organisation that we work in, especially the government departments. I know that they're starting to roll it into the well-being, because environmental and Maramataka can be used in terms of the well-being of the staff, of the whānau in there, and helping them to maintain their balance.
Another question from online. Do you have a favorite moon of the Maramataka?
Oh, do I have a favourite? I love all of them, but especially this time of the year, the moon, which is the full moons. You know, there's a lot of magic that happen. When I talk about magic, but it's a great time to go and sit at the beach. You have bigger waves coming in, they're louder. And I just love watching a sunset and then the moon rise all in one time. I just sit on this hill. You can watch the sun go down, and looking to the west, and then you look to the east, and you're watching the moon come up. It's quite a spectacular time, especially if you have all the different colours that happen in the sky, the reds, the purples. It's actually a real beautiful time of the month.
And can you use the Maramataka to support emotional well-being and health? And if so, how can it be used?
Because often I think, and I'll say that people, when we talked about Maramataka, people naturally assumed we were saying that the moon causes this. And what we were saying is, no, we can measure, and we use the moon, and we can gather the data, and what that data, it puts it into circles, and it puts it into stories. So it can be used for emotional well-being. But the big one is that our tipuna gave all these names. If I have a look at these names, Tangaroa and Tamatea, and connected to, and what we say is we can, with these names Tangaroa, it connects to an environmental element, which is the oceans and rivers. And we're saying at this time of the year, if you're feeling, at this time of the Maramataka, go and spend some time maybe swimming or sitting by the ocean. In the Tamatea phase, go and spend some time sitting in the environment, in the ngahere, in the forests. And this is one of the things that the doctors are doing. I was reading this paper, I think it was up in, is it Scotland or Ireland, where the doctors were prescribing people to go and spend time in the environment as part of their healing process. And because often they would and what I love about the Maramataka is our tipuna gave when to connect to the environment. So when to go to into the forest, and when we start measuring by the maramataka, and we start creating these patterns, and there might be particular times of that maramataka that we might be feeling low. Well, what's the environment that we can go and sit in and allow that space, allow us to ponder, to heal, and to reconnect to the environment. Now, what we're not saying is don't go to the doctor, but if there's different parts of our mental well-being in different stages of mental health. And one of the things that we've observed is with our whānau, when they connect to the environment and they do that consistently over a period of time at the right time, we have seen some amazing results where whānau have been able to self-heal. They've been able to reconnect to the environment, whether it be through fishing, whether it be through kayaking, whether that be going mountain climbing, and growing their own gardens. We have whānau and organisations that run gardening as part of the healing process for our youth, for our rangatahi.
Kia ora. Another one from online is, to your knowledge, has the maramataka been used as a tool for research, for example, in health?
Yeah, we have been working on research in health. There's other organisations that have used it as well, and what we're saying, and often I use this quote by I'm trying to remember his name, but Dr. Sean Wilson. He said it's not about pulling down the Eurocentric way of doing things, but elevating the indigenous knowledge to the same level. And we absolutely need Western science, we need Western frameworks, but we also have indigenous Māori ways of doing things as well that have totally validated. And it's not about pulling one side down to elevate the other. What we're saying is that e runga te pō runga te ao, what Western frameworks can we do, and what Māori frameworks, and if we put them both together, it's of benefit for our whānau. So they are implementing it into my whole research really is around whakamomori and indigenising the data of the Coronial Office. And when we started putting that data together, we put it in a way that it told us stories, when to watch out for whānau, how can we use the environment, and these have been implemented into many youth organisations, so they moving with the environment. So there's times that they take them fishing, times that they'll go mountain climbing, times that you stay inside in the maramataka. There's times that they say this is not a good time to do anything. So it's about rebalancing and using a mix of both our Western world and our mātauranga Māori.
And another question that came online is, I'm not sure if this is too off topic, but do you have anything to speak to regarding maramataka and ikura waifero? So I think relating to the menstrual cycle and the lunar calendar.
Yeah. What was that pātai again? Sorry.
So the relation between the maramataka and the menstrual cycle.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah. No, they both. When we talk about ikura or the menstrual cycle, if it follows the same patterns, and we call it those as the lunar cycle, and has there been research? And I think, and if I remember correctly, is it Ngahuia Murphy coming to speak at the next kōrero? I think it's next month. She's an absolute. That's her whole research was on ikura and whiro, and turning the menstrual cycles from because we have our lunar cycles, our wahine, our women also have cycles there too, and they call them the moon cycles. And so are they related? Yeah, they're both related, because when we look at the maramataka, we often say te pō is a female connection. And so when we look at the hina marama, we say the female connection. We look at the sun, we say there's a male, a tāne or male connection. And so Hina Marama, the moon cycles and the tides are exactly the same biorhythms as our wahine when they have their menstrual cycles as well.
Thank you. And I think that might be the final question is about how the Maramataka relates to seasons, and is it broken into sections, or does it have 12? So kind of months and Maramataka in seasons.
Oh, there's some cool seasons play a big part. So if I was to look at where we get, we have our lunar cycles, our Maramataka, we have whiro, we have our 12 or 13 whiros in a calendar year. There's often a star associated with that. So if we have a look at last month, it was Matariki in the lunar calendar. That's what we call a lunar stellar calendar, and Matariki represents winter. Now, it's broken, different iwi have different way of it. So if I talk about from a Ngāti Kahungunu view, we would say Takarua is the beginning of winter, Hotoke is the middle of winter, Hikumitu is the end of winter. But then we have at different iwis that might say Wero e te ninihi, Wero e te kokota, Wero e te whakataka. So there's many different ways that they measured the environment. So they broke it down into seasons. And then when I have a look, when there's this change between winter around September, we often call that Aroaro Mahana. And Aroaro Mahana is saying it's not quite spring, but there's this transition period between August and September where the environment is beginning to warm up. So these names describe the environment. And if we have a short winter, for example, and it's dry, well, when we will drop one of the we will drop Hikumitu, and we will go into Aroaro Mahana, meaning we're going to transition into spring, and then we go into Koanga. So everything just doesn't, I think what we've become conditioned to, I suppose, is at school we learn that the 1st of September is spring, the 1st of December is summer, and the 1st of March is autumn, and the 1st of June is winter. But as we study the environment, it doesn't quite happen that way. And so we would have these words, these kupu or kaupeka that we described there, will talk about transitioning times. And so Aroaro Mahana, then we go into Koanga, spring, and then spring will lead us into Raumati, Raumati will lead us into Ngaru. So we have 6 seasons in the Ngāti Kahungunu view, but then there's other iwi that have the 13 season, 7 phases of summer, 6 phases of winter. It's just not straight winter, spring, summer, but it'll describe the environment. So for one of the, like if I go to summer and we talk about Matiti Muramura, that is the 3rd phase of summer, and that is when the Pahutakawa trees are blooming. And then the 4th phase of summer might be Matiti Kaiwai, and Kaiwai means to thirst. And they'll be talking about, and when the ground begins to katakata mai, the ground begins to crack. And so that talks about that we're in the 4th phase of summer. And so it'll be describing the environmental as it's going through. And that's the way that our tipuna, it wasn't just summer, winter, spring, it would describe the environment and when that happened. And so all of our trees, all of our stars, all of our plants give us and describe the environment for us.
Kia ora, Ricky. Are there any more questions from the auditorium?
Tēnā koe matua, ki te whakamaaho no reira koraro English. As someone who grew up in the Northern Hemisphere, I really appreciate your what you've taught me, and because I find the sky very disorienting when I look up. So I really appreciate that you've walked us through the phases of the moon, and also just that it really is pipiri to harato, which is the haratua, which is the months, the cycle of the year, and the encouragement you've given me to explore the environment and to the guidance to know, where to start. I just wanted to mihi to you for that because it's been really disorienting for me for many years, and I think I have a starting point now to sort of feel at home here. So, kia ora.
Oh, kia ora. Talking of the Northern Hemisphere, I get disorientated whenever I go up there. It takes me a couple of days to get myself realigned, especially when I was up in Turtle Nation, up in terms of the top of Canada and the US with our indigenous nations there. But in terms of the hand signals that I talked about, they're the opposite in the Northern Hemispheres, and the stars are, for us, are upside down, but they're the right way for you. And yeah, so it's always we always take our reads in the morning, so we go out in the morning, we have a look at what stars are rising just before the sun rises, and those stars are indicators for the seasons. So we often talk about Matariki. Matariki's in the sky now for the rest of the year until next May. But during the summer months, Matariki goes through the night sky, and Rehua rises in the morning in summer. In the winter months, Matariki rises in the morning, and Rehua, or Antares, goes through the night sky. So they're always opposite each other. And so as you start to watch and observe the environment, you start to become in rhythm with it. Especially if you're watching the moon rising and setting, then you start watching the tides, and then you can start figuring out where the tides are just by the position of where the moon is. Is it an incoming tide? Is it an outgoing tide? And then you start to recognize, you probably leave here and you'll start seeing plants and flowerings of trees that you haven't seen before. You start hearing birds that at particular times of the year, they sing louder, they're calling. And those are absolutely valuable in terms of knowing your environment. So thank you for your kupu in terms of the Northern Hemisphere. Kia ora.
I think we've come to the end of our session. So I would like to invite Albie to close us off.
E nā mātou I te honore, Chief, ki te whakatakoto ngā kōrero a tāhua, ngā kōrero rangatira, ngā kōrero wa tātou mātua tūpuna, mai I tērā pito nā tikahununu, nā reira e te rangatira, tēnei ka mihi, tēnei ka mihi. Me te hohonutanga o ngā kōrero. Ko etahi o ngā kōrero, ngā warinu. Ko etahi a ngā kōrero, ko te hohonu ka puta. Nā reira ka mihi ake kia koe te rangatira, me o pukenga, me ngā taonga tuku iho, kai runga I a koe, me o tūpuna kai runga I a koe, tēnei ka mihi, nā reira tēnā koe, kai te huatu te rākau kōrero, ki te rangatira, ki taku whanaunga, nei nāna I whakapuaki mai mā tātou, ko te inoi atu mānā noi whakakapi mā tātou. Nā reira tēnā koe te rangatira. O tira huri no te whare, tēnā tātou.
Me karakia tātou. Ka rere manu ki uta, ka rere manu ki tai, ka kiwai ora e. Ka tūtū a whiowhio I nuku, ka tūtū a whiowhio I rangi. Ka ruku, ka puea, ka taupua, kei mata nuku, kei mata rangi. Kei te uru o Hawaiki nui e tau ana. Whiti o tūturu whakamaua kia teina. Haumi e hui e taiki e.